Most people fear isolation because it strips them of validation, noise, and comfort, but the truly powerful know this. Isolation is not exile, it's the forge where the unbreakable are crafted. In this video, we confront the problem ordinary minds avoid. Why does isolation destroy the weak but create dominance in those who can withstand it? In every age, the masses cling to the crowd, mistaking noise for certainty and company for strength. Yet the architects of power are those who bend men, systems, and empires learn one truth early. A man who cannot stand alone can never stand above others. Isolation is the crucible of rulers. It strips away illusion, dissolves weakness, and forces the mind to confront its own naked nature. To most, this confrontation feels like death, but to a select few, it becomes rebirth. Tonight, we step into that silent territory where the ordinary mind collapses and the exceptional mind awakens. Here, you will not find comfort, only clarity, the kind that sharpens itself on solitude, preparing you for a darker and more strategic world. Isolation strips away the illusions that society so eagerly drapes over you. And perhaps you have never questioned how much of your identity was assembled by other people, their expectations, their judgments, their praise, their disapproval, like invisible hands shaping your mind without your consent. But when you step into solitude, even briefly, those hands lose their grip. The noise fades, the masks fall, and for the first time, you face the uncomfortable possibility that the person you thought you were was merely a reflection of the crowd. This confrontation is painful, yes, but it is also the first step toward becoming unbreakable. Only when the illusions collapse can the true architecture of your mind begin to rise. Think of the rulers throughout history who understood this principle intuitively. Caesar withdrew from the Senate's suffocating politics to study his opponents quietly, emerging with a strategy that would reshape Rome. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations alone in the dead of night, while the empire slept, carving out mental clarity no advisor could offer him. Across centuries, the same pattern appears. The powerful retreat not because they fear the world, but because they refuse to be molded by it. They understood what you must now consider. If the crowd defines you, the crowd owns you, and anything the crowd owns can be broken. Ask yourself, how much of your confidence disappears when certain people leave the room? How much of your personality shifts to win approval? How many of your ambitions are inherited, not chosen? Most people never ask these questions because the answers threaten the fragile identity they've built on social validation. Yet you are here, listening, which means you already sense the truth. The illusions others place upon you are the heaviest chains you carry, and solitude is the blade that cuts them. But solitude does more than reveal who you are. It exposes who others are. When you step back, even slightly, you notice the unspoken manipulations that were previously invisible. The friend who only calls when he needs your energy. The coworker who flatters you to gain your compliance. The partner who praises your independence, but becomes anxious the moment you claim it. These dynamics are far easier to see when you are no longer immersed in them. Distance sharpens perception. Perception sharpens strategy. In isolation, patterns appear with brutal clarity. History offers a perfect analogy. During the Italian wars, generals who surveyed the battlefield from a hill removed from the chaos saw opportunities invisible to those fighting in the dust below. The same principle applies to your psychological battlefield. When you step above the noise, you detect motives, vulnerabilities, and ambitions with a precision unavailable to the person who remains entangled in social expectation. Solitude becomes not a retreat, but an elevated vantage point, a strategic high ground, and only from the high ground can you predict, influence, and outmaneuver. Yet, there is a deeper layer still. When the illusions fall away, you face a realization that unsettles most people. You have been playing roles your entire life, roles assigned to you by family, culture, and circumstance. You were rewarded when you performed them correctly, punished when you deviated. Over time, you mistook the role for the self. Isolation destroys that illusion. It holds up a mirror without filters, without applause, without distraction. And what you see there is either the beginning of your strength or the collapse of your entire identity. Many cannot endure this moment. They run back to the crowd, begging for the comfort of the familiar mask. But you, if you desire dominance, must hold that gaze. Consider the psychological implication. When the false self dissolves, a new kind of clarity emerges, one that is immune to social pressure. Suddenly you no longer need to impress. You no longer bend for approval. You no longer fear judgment. This shift gives you an advantage that is almost unfair, the ability to remain unmoved while others twist themselves into pleasing shapes. People become predictable, their motives transparent, their insecurities visible. And in a world where predictability is power, you become the one who cannot be manipulated. This is the silent transformation that isolation offers, not enlightenment, not peace, but sovereignty, the authority to define your own mind, your own values, your own direction. Once this authority is formed, it cannot be taken from you, not by flattery, not by pressure, not by force. And those who meet you afterward will sense something different, something unsettling, something they cannot shape. Yet, this is only the beginning. Because the moment the illusions fall away, a new question emerges, one far more dangerous, far more strategic, and far more revealing. What will you do with the clarity solitude has given you? Detachment is not coldness. It is the strategic removal of your emotions from the grasp of those who would eagerly exploit them. You may think your reactions belong to you, but observe how quickly someone's tone can shift your mood, how a single compliment can redirect your decisions, how a subtle insult can push you into defending what you never needed to justify. This is the invisible chain. Most people carry their emotions tethered to someone else's hand. But when you cultivate detachment, that chain breaks. You become responsive, not reactive, calculating, not consumed. And in a world where emotional chaos dictates most behavior, such clarity becomes a decisive advantage. History is filled with rulers who mastered this principle long before psychology gave it a name. Consider the Venetian diplomats, famed for their cool restraint. While other courts erupted in anger or dissolved in flattery, the Venetians remained unreadable. Their stillness was their weapon. Because when your face reveals nothing, others are forced to reveal everything. They talk more, they speculate more, they expose their intentions while you remain untouched. Detachment becomes intelligence. Intelligence becomes leverage, and leverage becomes power. You can see this dynamic even in everyday life. Think of the friend who always pulls you into their emotional storms, demanding your energy while offering none in return. When you detach, they panic. Why? Because your emotional availability was their tool. Or consider the coworker who uses praise as bait, hoping to secure your compliance. When you stop reacting to their flattery, their entire strategy collapses. Detachment exposes manipulation by depriving it of oxygen. What cannot provoke you cannot control you, but detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the discipline of choosing when, where, and for whom your emotions appear. Imagine a general surveying the battlefield. If he panics, his troops crumble. If he becomes sentimental, he hesitates. But if he remains calm, he sees openings invisible to those blinded by fear or pride. Emotional detachment, in its highest form, grants you this same elevated vantage point, a psychological hill, overlooking the chaos others fight within. Ask yourself, how many mistakes have you made because you were swept away by emotion? How many arguments escalated simply because you could not step back? How many opportunities slipped because someone manipulated your reactions? When you detach, these traps dissolve. You stop giving others the power to pull your strings. You stop mistaking emotional impulses for truth. And most importantly, you begin to see the architecture of human behavior with a clarity unavailable to those still entangled in their own reactions. There is also a darker advantage that few dare acknowledge. Detachment allows you to observe without being observed. It gives you the patience to let others reveal themselves fully. People confess truths to those who appear unaffected. They expose insecurities to those who do not mirror them. They trust the calm presence that does not compete for attention. By detaching, you transform into a psychological mirror reflecting nothing, revealing everything. And in this reflection, people unveil their desires, fears, and weaknesses with alarming ease. Consider the strategic exploits of certain Renaissance courts, where silence was more feared than threats. A man who spoke aggressively could be predicted. A man who pleaded could be dismissed, but a man who remained still, calm, detached, unreadable was dangerous. No one knew what he wanted. No one knew what he planned, and because uncertainty breeds fear, his very restraint granted him influence. Detachment, when practiced consistently, shapes how others move around you. They tread carefully. They reveal more than they intend. They give you power without realizing it. Yet detachment is not achieved overnight. It requires observing your own mind with the same precision you use to observe others. You must recognize the triggers that sway you, the flattery that softens you, the insults that ignite you, the people who drain you. Only then can you step back and reclaim control. Only then can you respond with intention instead of instinct. And once you master this, something remarkable happens. Your presence shifts. People feel a steadiness in you that they cannot explain. They sense they cannot shake you, cannot manipulate you, cannot mold you. Your calm becomes unsettling. Your restraint becomes intimidating. Your silence becomes powerful. But detachment is only the second layer of the unbreakable mind. Because once you learn to withdraw your emotions, the next challenge emerges. What will you do with the power this detachment creates? Power is not gained by adding more people to your life. It is gained by removing the wrong ones. Most individuals cling to every connection they make, as if quantity could compensate for weakness. They confuse a crowded life with a powerful one. But solitude reveals a truth that the noise of society hides. People are filters. They either sharpen you or drain you. They either strengthen your ascent or sabotage it quietly, skillfully, and often unintentionally. And when you step back into isolation, the true nature of each person becomes painfully visible. Ask yourself, who around you grows silent when you succeed? Who disguises envy as advice? Who sabotages subtly wrapped in concern? You rarely see these patterns while standing in the middle of them. But when you step away, when you embrace even temporary isolation, the fog lifts, and you begin to understand that your environment is not neutral. Every presence either builds your power or dilutes it. History has always rewarded those who understood this filtering process. Consider the rise of the Medici. They surrounded themselves not with the many, but with the precise few who could advance their strategic position. Bankers, philosophers, mercenaries, spies, each chosen deliberately. And those who threatened the family's stability were removed with equal precision. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. A prince cannot carry dead weight. A strategist cannot afford emotional clutter. And you, if you wish to become unbreakable, must learn the same discipline. Look at your own life through this lens. How many alliances have you maintained out of habit? How many friendships exist simply because they have always existed? How many relationships continue because you fear the loneliness that would follow their removal? But isolation teaches you to see the cost of keeping the wrong people close. The vague discomfort, the quiet resentment, the subtle manipulation disguised as affection, and most importantly, the psychological dependence that keeps you from rising. This is why isolation is a filter. It exposes the emotional contracts you never agreed to but still obey. Imagine a man who constantly demands your time but never offers value in return. When you create distance, he becomes offended not because he cares, but because your absence deprives him of convenience. Or the friend who showers you with encouragement when you struggle but grows uneasy when you begin to grow. When you isolate yourself, their mask slips. Their discomfort is not with your solitude, it is with your evolution. Isolation reveals these dynamics because it interrupts the cycle. When you are not accessible, people show their true priorities. The loyal remain steady. The supportive encourage your growth. The envious fade, the dependent panic, and the manipulative attempt to pull you back into the role you once played. Which of these reactions do you encounter? The answer tells you everything you need to know. But there is another, more subtle layer. Some relationships weaken you not through malice, but through mediocrity. Consider how easily you adopt the habits of those around you. Their fears become your fears. Their limits become your limits. Their distractions become your distractions. Humans mirror the environment they stay in, even when that environment is shrinking them. This is why soldiers train away from the civilian world, why philosophers retreat to nature, why leaders withdraw before making decisive choices. They understand that staying among the average leads to average thinking, and average thinking is the enemy of power. Ask yourself, how much stronger would your mind be if you removed the voices that always doubt, the ones who tell you to be realistic, which is merely their way of insisting you remain small? How different would your decisions be if you no longer feared losing people who contribute nothing but comfort? And what would your future look like if you surrounded yourself only with those who sharpen your ambition instead of softening it? This is the essence of the power filter. Isolation strips away the unnecessary. It reveals who truly aligns with your path, and it forces you to confront a harsh truth. Your life cannot rise if your company remains low. Yet filtering people is only half the transformation. Once you identify who weakens your climb, you face an even sharper question. Are you strong enough to detach from them and walk toward a higher version of yourself? Cognitive sovereignty is the rarest form of power because it requires something most people never attempt. Thinking without the influence of the crowd. Not thinking against them. Not thinking above them. Simply thinking without them. You might assume you already do this, but consider how quickly public opinion shapes your beliefs, how trends guide your desires, how praise or ridicule alters your choices. The mind absorbs the surrounding world like a sponge, and only isolation squeezes it dry. Only then do you begin to discover which thoughts are yours, and which were planted in you by society. History repeatedly shows that independent thinkers were formed in solitude long before they influenced the world. Think of Ibn Khaldun, writing his Muqaddimah in exile, observing human behavior with a clarity that only distance could provide. Or Spinoza, polishing lenses alone, while crafting ideas that would outlive the nations around him. Even the princes of old withdrew before decisive action. Not out of fear, but to purify their reasoning from the distortions of public sentiment. If rulers needed solitude to think clearly, what makes you believe you can rise without it? Ask yourself how many of your beliefs are inherited, not earned. How many opinions do you hold simply because everyone around you holds them? How often do you defend positions you never examine deeply? Most people are not thinking, they are echoing. They mistake consensus for truth. Yet consensus has never produced anything exceptional. Innovation, strategy, and dominance come from those who dare to think alone. Isolation gives you this space. It removes the psychological contagion of the crowd, the fear of being judged, the pressure to conform, the subtle desire to be accepted. These forces operate on you more than you realize. When you detach, even briefly, you begin to recognize their influence. You start asking questions the average mind avoids. Why do people follow trends they secretly dislike? Why do they champion ideas they do not understand? Why do they surrender their judgment so willingly? Solitude sharpens your perception by freeing you from the emotional investment you have in belonging, and this independence becomes a weapon. Consider a real-life example. A company team debates a project. Most members agree instantly, afraid to appear difficult. Their desire for harmony outweighs the need for accuracy. Yet, one person steps back, examines the situation without social pressure, and identifies a flaw no one else noticed. Their thinking, unclouded by the need for approval, changes the entire direction of the project. This is cognitive sovereignty in action, the ability to think without bending. But the true advantage runs deeper. When you think independently, you become unpredictable. Predictability is the root of manipulation. It allows others to anticipate your reactions and guide them subtly. But a sovereign mind responds with logic, not pressure, with strategy, not emotion, with principles chosen deliberately, not absorbed unconsciously. Try manipulating someone who is detached from the psychological influence of the group. Their calm becomes a barrier. Their clarity becomes armor. Their decisions become difficult to sway. Isolation strengthens this state because it forces your mind to rely on itself. Without constant input, without the noise of others' opinions, your internal voice grows sharper. You begin forming judgments from observation and analysis rather than conformity. You start identifying patterns others overlook because you are not blinded by the need to fit in. Think of the generals who studied maps alone before battle. In solitude, they could see the battlefield long before stepping onto it. Your life is no different. Strategic thinking requires silence. And with silence comes ownership of your thoughts. This ownership is transformative. You stop adopting beliefs simply because they are fashionable. You stop following advice simply because it is common. You stop fearing disapproval because it no longer shapes your identity. Eventually, something extraordinary occurs. You begin to respect your own reasoning more than the opinions surrounding you. That is the moment your mind becomes sovereign. But sovereignty comes with a risk. Once you begin thinking independently, you will see through the illusions that sustain the average person's life, their distractions, their excuses, their borrowed convictions. And once you see these things, you cannot unsee them. You may even feel the temptation to withdraw completely. Yet sovereignty is not isolation forever. It is the ability to enter society without losing yourself in it. Because the next question is not, can you think alone? It is something far more difficult. Can you keep that clarity when the world tries to pull you back into its influence? To understand this fifth principle, you must confront a truth most people spend their lives avoiding. The world does not reward your intentions, only your leverage. Consider the ancient courts of Florence, where alliances shifted faster than the seasons. A man could speak of loyalty, of trust, of virtue. But none of these mattered unless he possessed the influence to enforce them. And this is the backbone of the fifth keynote. Power is never granted, it is only taken, shaped, and maintained through an unblinking awareness of human weakness. You, too, live in a landscape ruled by the same forces. The faces around you might be modern, but their minds are ancient. People react to pressure, status, and fear in precisely the ways they always have. You think your intelligence alone will elevate you? No. Intelligence without leverage is merely decoration. It pleases the eye, but it moves nothing. Ask yourself, how often have you known the right move but lacked the force to execute it? How many opportunities slipped simply because you hesitated, unsure whether you possessed the authority to act? That hesitation is the birthplace of all lost power. A predator that doubts its strike becomes prey within a breath. History offers examples carved in the bones of fallen rulers. Consider Emperor Valerian captured by the Persians and used as a human footstool for their king. He entered negotiations believing goodwill would protect him. What protected him? Nothing. Goodwill is a myth wielded by those who have no other weapon. Power respects only strength, or the perception of it. Let me bring this closer to your life. Imagine a workplace where two individuals compete for the same position. One is competent, disciplined, reliable. The other is not as skilled but understands influence. He cultivates alliance, whispers strategically, and shapes narratives around himself. Who rises? Not the deserving, only the prepared. You have seen this. Perhaps you were even the competent one who watched the manipulator ascend. And in that moment, did you feel the sting of injustice? If so, remember this. Injustice is simply the world revealing its true operating system. You can resent it, or you can learn to use it. Power grows in silence long before it becomes visible. The roots you plant in the shadows determine the empire you command in the light. And yet most people chase attention, exposing their strategies like fools parading their weapons before a battlefield. Do you? When you announce your intentions prematurely, you give others the chance to undermine you. Influence thrives on mystery, on the strategic concealment of your next move. In psychological terms, people grant authority to those who appear self-assured, even when that confidence is a curated illusion. Humans are drawn to certainty, repelled by doubt. This means you can win ground long before you deserve it, if you present yourself as someone who has already secured the outcome. Observe a skilled interrogator. He never begs for truth, he constructs an atmosphere where truth feels inevitable. This is the essence of leverage, not brute force, but shaping the environment so that others' choices funnel toward the outcome you desire. And here lies the heart of this keynote. Dominance is not an act, but an ecosystem you create. Your presence becomes the architecture in which others move. Once this hands, you no longer need to assert your power. People enforce it for you. This is the arena where true strategy is born, for power is not merely a force but a language spoken through actions, silences, and carefully chosen alliances. When you learn to read this language, you stop reacting to the world and begin rewriting it. Remember, hesitation is surrender disguised as caution, act before doubt. But even this principle carries a darker layer one most will never understand, because the ability to create such an ecosystem requires something rare. The willingness to see human nature without flinching, to recognize manipulation not as cruelty, but as anatomy, to use fear not as punishment, but as gravity that keeps others in orbit. And if you can master that, then the next keynote will show you something even more unsettling: how to make people depend on you without them ever noticing. When you re-enter the world after a period of isolation, you do not return as the same person who once sought its approval. You return with a quieter mind, a sharper eye, and a steadiness that others cannot immediately name. This transformation is subtle, but its effects are unmistakable. People sense something different in you, something unsettling, something compelling. They cannot find the strings they used to pull. And without those strings, their entire dynamic with you shifts. This is the essence of the sixth keynote. The return from isolation creates a new psychological gravity. Others feel it even before you speak. Ask yourself, have you ever encountered someone whose calm presence filled the room more powerfully than loud voices or dramatic gestures? Someone who didn't need to assert control, yet subtly directed the behavior of everyone around them? That is the aura born from solitude, not arrogance, not aggression, but a centeredness that suggests you cannot be shaken. People instinctively adjust themselves around such a person. History is filled with figures who understood the strategic value of this quiet power. Consider Napoleon's return from Elba. Though weakened politically, his mere presence composed, deliberate, and unbroken drew soldiers back to him without a single battle. He did not beg for loyalty, he embodied it. His stillness spoke louder than any speech. When you return from isolation with true self-possession, you create a similar effect on a smaller scale. People align themselves not because you demand it, but because your certainty makes them question their own. This psychological gravity works in subtle ways. Imagine you walk into a room where people once underestimated you. Before isolation, you may have reacted seeking validation, defending yourself, complaining, explaining. But now, you observe. You listen more than you speak. You answer only what matters. Your restraint becomes power. Your silence becomes strategy. And suddenly, those who once talked over you begin to measure their words. They cannot predict your reactions anymore, and unpredictability creates influence. Even in everyday relationships, this transformation is profound. A clingy friend becomes cautious. A manipulative partner senses resistance. A dismissive coworker grows attentive. Why? Because isolation has stripped you of the need for external approval. And the moment you no longer need something from someone, they lose control over you. This is one of the most potent psychological shifts a human can experience. The transition from emotional dependence to strategic autonomy. But there is another, darker layer to the return. Your perception is no longer naive. While others navigate the world through habit and impulse, you begin to see patterns, predictable cycles of fear, pride, envy, and insecurity. Solitude has trained you to listen to the unsaid, to watch the small gestures that reveal true intentions, to detect flattery crafted for advantage, to sense the subtle tremors of jealousy. You become a reader of people, and the world becomes a text written in human behavior. This perceptiveness grants you immense leverage, because most individuals cannot see themselves clearly. Their desires blind them, their fears distort them, their egos deceive them. But you, having faced your own mind first, recognize these distortions in others instantly. And when you understand someone more deeply than they understand themselves, you can guide their decisions without force. Influence becomes effortless. Consider a skilled chess player returning to play novices after months of studying alone. While they see only their next move, he sees the next 20. Your mind becomes that chess player. Calm, strategic, aware of the entire board. But this return is not only about perception, it is about presence. Your posture changes, your tone steadies. You no longer rush conversations or scramble to fill silence. People sense a person who is not driven by impulse. They sense someone with internal order. In a world ruled by emotional turbulence, such order is magnetic. People trust it, fear it, admire it, even if they cannot articulate why. And this is the paradox of isolation. You leave the world to find your strength. You return to the world, and the world feels your strength. But here lies the crucial question, the question that shapes what you become next. Now that you carry this sharpened presence, will you use it to lead, to manipulate, to protect, or to dominate? Because the final truth is this: how you wield this new power will determine whether your return creates harmony or upheaval. You now see the truth, don't you? Control is never seized through force alone. It is woven quietly, strand by strand, through perception, suggestion, and the illusions people willingly accept. The most powerful influence is the one they never detect, the command hidden inside a question, the direction disguised as concern, the outcome you orchestrate while they believe it was their choice. Ask yourself, how many of your victories came from silence rather than confrontation? How many from shaping the environment instead of shaping the person directly? Remember this: people fight visible chains, but they submit to the invisible ones. If you master this art guarding minds without raising suspicion, you move through the world like a shadow steering giants, unnoticed, untouched, unchallenged. Now I want to hear your mind at work. Comment your thoughts below. Tell me how you interpret this hidden form of power. And if you wish to continue sharpening your strategic instincts, subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who thinks they cannot be controlled. Let them discover how mistaken they are.